Hello everyone, my name is Hanil Mistry and my ID number is 20C054. So today I am going to present my topic in microprocessor and computer organization subject, which is listed over here, that hardware and OS of a router. So the router is basically nothing but a networking device. So let us start the discussion on this topic. So you might be wondering that what is a router? I have said that it is a networking device, but what is actually a router? So let us understand. It is nothing but basically a computer like PC or laptop, which we have used till now. So with this line, you might be wondering that what is actually a computer. So in microprocessor and computer organization, the definition of computer is that it is a hardware module that can perform certain tasks based on information provided. So I think this definition is pretty much clear to you. So now what is actually a router and what is the history of a router? So router is basically a networking device which is designed specifically to organizing a communication between computer networks. And as it is a networking device, this topic might be difficult to understand for someone who don't really know what is the network is. But as this microprocessor and computer organization comes in the fourth semester, and any computer engineer in the third semester have learned the DCN subject, data communication and networking. So you might be familiar with the computer networks. So with those knowledge in your mind, you may be able to cope up with these topics. So it is very smart networking device in the internet history. So however, it is not the first product or device in the internet history. There exists some dumb device also, like the hub. Hub is very dumb device in networking or internet history, and switches, layer 3 switches and routers. So as we go from the left to right in this given order, like hub to switch, switch to layer 3 switch, and layer 3 switch to router, the smartness of a device increases. We will discuss about hardware and OS of our routers only. So as my topic is fixed, so we will not discuss about the hub switches or layer 3 switches. We will focus only on the router and specifically hardware and OS of a router. So hardware components of a router. So hardware components of a router, there exist we can you can say that we can uh, distribute the hardware component of a router in two categories, like internal components and external components. So the internal components are CPU, memory components, and in memory components there exist RAM, Nvram, ROM and flash memory, and power supply and configure register. We will see all the details about the all the listed items over here, and the internal components is very much important to understand in specifically if we talk about the microprocessor and computer organization, and the external components, which are management ports, LAN or WAN interfaces, USB port, EHWIC slots or flash card slot. They are not really important to understand, but it may be necessary for someone who is familiar with the networking and someone who wanted to go in the networking career. So they need to understand the external components. We will also discuss about the external component, but not briefly as much as we will discuss for the internal components. So the hardware components. So as you can see on the screen, this is basically the, you can say that circuit diagram or motherboard of a wired router, and basically this is a Cisco router's motherboard. So the first one, you can see over here the boundary of this, which is power supply box for this whole hardware components. its job is to provide the power supply to all the hardware components. Then now you can see over here, which is a cooling fan for no, not to for controlling the heat. This is a RAM basically. You can see over here in this box. This is a CPU portion. This is ROM. You can see this is management ports. This is also management port, and this is also management port section. This is flash memory. So now we will see the details of all the listed internal hardware components of a router that we have seen. So the first internal hardware components that we will going to see is CPU. So the CPU executes operating system instructions like booting up, routing functions, and switching functions. So the job of the CPU, you might be familiar with the job of the what is the job of the CPU, because you have studied the microprocessor and computer organization subject. So basically, if we talk about the computing, so the CPU of a router computes the do some algorithms such as Dijkstra's SPF algorithm for OSPF. So the OSPF, what is the OSPF? OSPF is nothing but the routing protocol, which stands for Open Shortest Path First protocol. So this is one of the routing protocol. There exists some more routing protocols, but we are not going to discuss about routing protocol. You just need to focus that CPU executes some instruction in the OS, in the router basically. So as you can see on the screen, this is the motherboard of a Cisco router, and this is the CPU. Some other motherboards also exist for some different configuration of a router or some different router. So they also have the same kind of CPU. You can see this over here. This is basically different motherboard than this. This is a Cisco router 1841 series, and this is a Cisco router 1941 series, I think so. So now we will going to see about internal hardware components for RAM. So it is a volatile memory. As you might be aware that RAM is a volatile memory, and it stores the instruction and data that needs to be executed by the CPU. So iOS, which is the Inter-Network Operating System, which is used by Cisco routers as the OS operating system on their router, which controls the overall flow of the router. So it is copied from the flash memory that we will going to see further, that how it is fetched. So basically iOS is copied and extracted into RAM during the boot up process. So what does the RAM stores for, or what does the RAM do? So RAM stores operating system, as we have seen iOS, then running configuration files, routing tables, ARP cache, and packet buffers. So these terms might be you aware about because you have studied the DCN subject. So the operating system, as we have seen, iOS, the running configuration file on which the currently router is configured. Basically, it stores the configuration of port, default gateway, a access list, and all that stuff. Routing tables, as you might be aware about that, for routing to one network to another different network, different subnet, the routing table is used. Then ARP cache and packet buffers. Packet buffers are basically when the packets arrived on some port and it needs to check the destination, and according to destination IP address, the packet is routed. So it needs to be stored during that process. So the packet buffers is used to store the packet. Then it's check the destination and then routes. So this is the motherboard as we have seen previously. So this is the RAM, and this is another motherboard of some another router. So this is over here, RAM is shown, and this is the extra slot for extension of a RAM. As you can see this white strip on which we can we can attach the ROM for the extension. So now we will see about the Nvram. So on this motherboard, you can see the Nvram. This is a little circuit, little thing you can see over here, which is nothing but Nvram. So what is Nvram? It is a non-volatile RAM, as you might be aware about this term non-volatile. So it stores the startup configuration file or backup configuration file. It is used by Cisco IIS as permanent storage for startup configuration file. So Cisco IIS is nothing but the OS which is used by Cisco routers. When the router is booted, it checks up for NVRAM for configuration. If it is empty, then router goes into initial setup mode. As you can see the flowchart over here, when the router is rebooted and it checks the NVRAM. If it NVRAM is found empty, then it goes into setup mode. So the startup configuration file stores the configuration of ports, default gateways, access list, etc. As I have said earlier, that what is the startup configuration file? It is nothing but the file which stores the configuration of ports, default gateway, and access list. This might be familiar to the networking persons, that what is the startup configuration file. Now we will see about ROM. So as you might be aware that what is ROM. So it is non-volatile read-only memory. It is located near the flash memory. It it is used to start and manage the router configuration basically. So it stores the bootstrap starter program. So as you might be aware that bootstrap starter program, it is a program when the any device is start, it is loaded and it starts the all the parts. So it stores the bootstrap starter program, power on diagnostics program, which is also referred as post, or maybe mini iOS or limited iOS. So this much thing is stored in the ROM. In the general Cisco routers, it initially runs the bootstrap program when the router is powered on and the check for post on each components. So this is the working. These 2 points are the basically working of a ROM, that when the router is powered on, it check for the post. It runs the bootstrap program first, then check for the post that it runs. It tries to do the power on diagnosis test on the all the components. If it after the post is completed, it loads the iOS from the flash memory into RAM and unzip it. So the flash memory is that we will going to discuss further, but from for now you assume that from the flash memory it loads the iOS, unzip it, and it stores in the RAM. If it does not find the iOS from the flash, then it loads the stripped down version of iOS stored in ROM. So you have as I have said that it stores the mini iOS or limited iOS. So mini iOS is nothing but the stripped down version of a iOS, which can be generally found from flash memory. So as you can see on the screen, this is the motherboard and this is the ROM, as you can see, and this is the flash memory. As I have said that it is located near the flash memory. This is another motherboard of a different router. This is flash memory slot. We will see this in external hardware components, that what is the flash memory slot. Basically the flash memory will be inserted into this slot and the uh, whole thing can use this flash memory. And this little chip over here is a ROM. So now we will see about the internal hardware components. Flash memory. So it is a non-volatile EEPROM. So it is electrically erasable PROM, which stores a zipped version of iOS, and it is a permanent storage for system related files. Some routers have flash memory slots in which we can insert a flash memory, and once the router is booted, we can remove it from the slot. However, we need the flash memory always when the router is booted or restarted. So as we have seen in previous slide, that there was a flash memory slot in another type of router and another type of a motherboard of a router. So basically, what it is for? It is nothing. It is for the inserting the flash memory, and flash memory, it is used when the router is booted up. As we have seen that when the router is booted up, the flash memory ROM loads the flash memory into RAM, and whole the thing starts up. So once the router is booted, so now the iOS of which is stored in flash memory, it is available on the RAM. So we don't need the flash memory anymore. So we can also remove it from there, and we can with that only one flash memory, we can start up more than one router. So that is one, you can say, pros of a flash memory slot, that we can remove or insert the flash memory. Though so some routers have integrated flash memory. We will see that. So you can see over here, this is a motherboard, and this is an integrated flash memory. As I have said, mentioned over here, that some routers have integrated flash memory while some router have flash memory slots. So as you can see over here, this is a motherboard of another router, and this is a flash memory slot. We can insert any flash memory over here. We can use the different flash memory from the previous one, and we can reboot the router, and new flash memory or new OS will be loaded. So now we will see the power supply in the internal hardware components. It is basically power supplied to all the hardware components of a router. So as it says that power supply. So some routers may have multiple power supply for redundancy. As you can see on the screen, this is a motherboard of a router, and this is a power supply over here. It provides the power to all the hardware components. You can see these cables are going through in this circuit. So it provides the power to hold the whole motherboard, whole hardware components which is needed to on the router, or which is needed to functional router, as you can say. So now we will see about external hardware components. So what are the external hardware components that we have seen previously? So this is basically Cisco router 1841 series. As you can see over here, it is written Cisco 1841. So external hardware components, what does this mean? Which means these ports, or this much as we are seeing on the screen. So one by one we will see that what are the external hardware components. So these two are management ports, as we are seeing on the screen. So there exist two management ports, console port and aux port. Basically from the console port we can configure the router. With the aux port, it is support to older dial-up versions. So this is aux port and this is console port. By the help of these two ports, we can manage the router, or we can configure we can initially configure the router, as you can say. These two are EHWIC ports. This is you can also refer it as extra port slot 1, or this is extra port slot 2. These you can consider as LAN or WAN ports also. This is a USB port, and this is RJ45 fast Ethernet connectors. These you can connect the RJ45 over here, and two different networks are connected over here, and computer networks, you can say two different computer networks are connected over here, and they can communicate only when the router is configured properly with this console, with the help of this console port, or either with the console port or with the aux port. This is a flash memory slot, and you can see this is a flash memory inserted in the flash memory slot. So once the router is configured, or you can say once the router is booted, you can remove this flash memory as I have said previously. This is nothing but power supply. You can you can bring up that cable, connect here, and you can directly connect the AC power supply. And this is a on-off switch. With this switch, you can reboot the router. So that's it. I think with this presentation, you might be understood about the hardware and OS of a router. That how does the hardware and OS works together on the router, and we can communicate with the different computer networks, whole with the only help of the router intermediate node. So for the networking person, this PPT is I think sufficient to grab the knowledge of a router. And for the MCO microprocessor and computer organization, this maybe help in to understand the job of a different components like RAM, ROM, and Nvram, and how does they work, and how does they connect, and how does they actually look like. And you can also differentiate the OS, how does the different OS works. Basically in this presentation I have only considered the Cisco routers. There are lots of routers in this global, in this current era. There are also wireless router which are different than the wired router, or they have different type of motherboards. They different type of routers may use the different OS. You can just go on the Google and search it out that what OS does the today's routers or today's wireless router uses. So you might be get lots and lots of open source OS for the router. So this was the overall, or you can say basic idea that I want to convey from my presentation. So thank you for listening to me.